set array along the long axis of a linear grid.
Or against it?
Along,
Along, okay.
I think, yes, that's how it should be done. So angling across it then, you're cut off. Okay. So read that question if you have that tomorrow carefully. If you angle along the long axis of a linear grid, it's not going to do anything to your image. If you angle across the long axis of the linear grid, it will cause grid cutoff. And specifically, what type of grid error? Off level. Anytime you're angled across the long axis of the grid strips, it's an off level grid error. The Moyer effect is caused by what type of grids that are used in digital radiography?
Low frequency.
Low frequency. Very good. What is the minimum amount of filter material needed for any X-ray that operates above 70 kVp? 2.5, is that? There you go, 2.5 millimeters of aluminum equivalents. And is that inherited, added? Total, yes. 2.5, anything that operates above 70 kVp must have 2.5 millimeters aluminum equivalents of total filtration. Approximately how much filtration does the collimator device usually add? About 1.0. Okay. Ask this question this way. What are some advantages of CR over conventional film radiography? No darkroom, storage space,
Cheaper.
No film.
that'd be over DR, cheaper is what you're thinking. Well, over, I know what you're saying, over time.
No
then
film.
you'll
No
have to
processing,
film,
no chemical
No
processing.
film.
Okay, no chemical processor, okay, no storage for that.
Image modification.
That's one of the main ones I was looking for. Post-processing manipulations, wider exposure latitude, all of those things. So study that from your notes, because that will appear in one question or another, at least one question or another. Okay, we have that listed. Name some examples of beam restricting devices other than the collimator. Diaphragm.
Cone.
Cone. Cylinders. Those are the three I was looking for right there. Diaphragms, cones, cylinders. Okay, the 4 steps of image creation with a CR cassette are what? In what order?
Exposure.
Expose, stimulate, read, almost forgot it, and erase. Very good. And once again, during the exposure phase, the electrons exist in a what type of state? Metastable state. That was a question I had in here last time. Yes, then they return to a ground state once they've been stimulated. Because a CR cassette is more prone to background radiation, it should be released after how many hours of non-use?
8.
24 on that one.
24.
What is the secondary purpose of the upper shutters of the collimator device?
Off-focus radiation.
Okay, to reduce off-focus radiation. And then the secondary purpose of the lower shutters,
Simulate field size.
that's the primary purpose.
Absorb the lower heat filter.
Reduce penumbra. Lower shutters reduce penumbra, upper shutters reduce off-focus radiation. Which one of those would provide the best type of radiopaque strips?
80.
The highest atomic number. Okay. Why is aluminum sometimes used as an interspace material when constructing a grid?
It allows them faster.
Okay, that is true. It's radiolucent, but why would we use that instead of carbon fiber? This is a question on your worksheet.
It's durable, the durability of it, because it said something about moisture in the big word.
Okay. There's something else though. Something else I'm trying to get out
What
of
was
this.
the question?
Easier to construct. You guys remember that from your worksheet yesterday? Okay, why is aluminum sometimes used as the interspace material of a grid? It's easier to construct than carbon fiber. You guys were right though. I mean, you talked about the warping, you talked about the radiolucency. That's true. This wasn't the answer I was trying to get out.
What was the
Actually, let's stick with these numbers. Which one of these atoms would result in a secondary characteristic X-ray photon with the highest energy?
Characteristic.
80.
8, exactly. So in other words, which one of those, if they underwent a photoelectric interaction, would result in the X-ray photon with the most energy? Higher atomic numbers, higher binding energies, higher secondary X-ray energies created. Make sense?
Yes.
The electron that is ejected during a Compton interaction is called a what?
Recoil.
Recoil or Compton electron. And again, the ejected electron in a photoelectric interaction. Photoelectron, yes. Okay. Not do DR, so I can't ask that. How many half-value layers would it take to reduce the intensity to 12.5 millirankins if my original was 100 millirankins? Exactly, 3. 50, 25, 12.5. Same topic. When testing, if the half-value layer of diagnostic equipment is too low, how would it be corrected? Adding what? No, you're right. It's adding something. That's it. Adding filtration. If the half-value layer is too low, gotta add filtration. Okay. What are the two main things that control the contrast and brightness levels seen on a digital image?
Window panel.
Okay, before you get to that,
Window panel.
we talked about it. Histogram and
Oh, histogram.
lookup tables.
Histogram and lookup table.
And then, of course, if I asked you the two main things that control contrast and density, No, you would tell me KVP and have A's, what she's worked since